Hello everyone, and welcome to Series 1, Episode 1 of an all-new show called The Smooth Thrills Radio Hour. I'm your host, Jason Rutledge. So what is this show? Each week over the next 7 weeks, we're going to deep dive into several movies, all centered around a theme, like cyberpunk movies, end-of-the-world movies, 1980s comedies. Some of these movies you'll know, you'll love, some of them you might not be familiar with, but each one is interesting and holds an important place in our culture in its own particular way. In this series, for example, we're going to talk about Salem's Lot, The Day After, Hardware, Fandango, and a bunch of others. We hope you'll join us on this strange and mysterious journey and enjoy your ride along the way. In this episode, we're looking back at 1981 and the summer of werewolves, the Howling, Wolfen, and of course, An American Werewolf in London. I'm joined this week in our Old East Dallas studio by our panelists, Nathan and Katie, so let's get on with the show. But first, Griffin Dunn has a warning for you about what to expect in the afterlife.
The undead surround me. Have you ever talked to a corpse? It's boring. I'm lonely.
I hear those podcasts where people are literally going over filmographies.
That's why I wrote stuff down, because then it's like I can at least reference it, and then I'm not kidding. I literally moved the notebook to grab something, and then
well, let's get on with it then, everybody. Welcome once again to this episode of the Smooth Thrills Radio Hour, coming to you live from the heart of Old East Dallas. In this episode, we're looking back at the summer of 1981, where 3 studios released 3 werewolf movies within 4 months of each other. One became a beloved horror classic. One was successful enough to spawn several sequels over the next 30 years. And one is called Wolfen. Let's get into it. Okay, so this is an unusual situation. Scheduling movies back then was not like we have now. This was not like a 2 weeks and you're done. Then 6 months later, you're on video on demand or on Blu-ray. The movies released to theaters in the 80s and even well into the 90s could be in the theater circuit for a year or even 2 years as they made their way from premiere to dollar theater. So to have 3 horror movies released that close together was a little weird. For them to be werewolf movies is downright bizarre, because werewolf movies are not that common at all to begin with. So the thing I couldn't figure out is why everybody went crazy for werewolves in 1981. Why did they decide this was the thing we should do? And I still don't know for sure.
Well, I say why not?
So the first one to hit theaters was The Howling. This was released April 22nd, 1981. Joe Dante, fresh off his wild success from Piranha.
Hell yeah.
Got the okay to do this. Jonathan Sayles was writer on this. This really made Rob Bottin's career as a special effects guy. They got him because his buddy Rick Baker was busy with another project, which we'll get to a little bit later. But I think this is what got him the gig on The Thing, really.
Yes, as far as I know. That was because Bottin did it right before 81, and then they basically shot The Thing during 81. So.
Katie, you saw this for the first time, I think, just in the last couple of days.
Mm-hmm.
What did you think? Where was your head at on this one?
Honestly, I wasn't a huge fan of it. Because it's something that as a horror fan, you definitely hear a lot about because people really enjoy it. And I don't know if because I don't have the history with it or because I didn't grow up with it. I just don't see the appeal of the film. I like some of the stuff that it attempted to do, but honestly, I'm not a huge fan.
I think fighting words have been thrown down.
Yes, I understand that.
It does seem to have a hard time finding a tone and staying on it, I thought. Because it starts off as a horror movie. It starts off, we have that first really pretty scary scene in the peep show booth with Eddie, which we'll play a clip of, actually.
You know, the people here, they're dead. They could never be like me. But you're different, Karen. I watch you on TV, and I know how good I can make you feel. I'm gonna light up your whole body, Karen.
ready for something.
We're not showing Eddie right now, but we've established this. It's supposed to be scary, and something Eddie says right there, I think, was supposed to be a through line on this whole movie. And it's common with a lot of werewolf movies in that you're not real unless you've eaten another human being as a wolf person. Is that what they're getting at here? I'm not really sure.
Well, or this is, a sexual bend also for him.
Well, yeah, I mean, most werewolf movies have either something to do with either puberty, as in I was a
coming to
teenage
terms with your inner beast,
or ginger snaps or something like that.
I always took it as, I say always, I just saw it, but dealing with your inner monster.
Yeah.
Like this one definitely touches on that a lot, about humanity and the monsters within that.
Well, his line, none of these people are real.
Mm-hmm.
Who is he talking? Is he talking about everybody? Is he talking about just the porno actors, which I believe were cut out of the British version?
Yeah, I really don't see why that took place, where it took place, other than, hey, this is hidden. Nobody's going to be in here but us.
Right.
Because I don't really
solidarity
see
of the
why
moment.
the peep show part had to even be in that scene, other than, hey, I need light to show you who I am.
Yeah.
That's pretty effective. I mean, it works.
Yeah.
But does it work because, hey, this is a horror movie and we want you to feel uncomfortable during this scene? Or does it work because this is interweaving with what he's saying?
That's a good point, because it does kind of want to rattle you a little bit right from the get-go.
And I mean, it is unsettling. So.
Yeah. And that whole scene, like the whole porno, like it just reminds me of like William Friedkin's Cruising, or a lesser known movie that I absolutely love called Night of the Juggler, that with James Brolin.
I don't think I've seen that one. I wouldn't have connected it to Cruising though, necessarily.
But just the whole, because that movie is very foreboding and very like, it's very dark and it's very purposefully unsettling throughout.
Right.
And they put you in that culture, which could be unsettling. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't to whomever's watching it. But at the same time, I think not that this was a deliberate move, because Cruising was out a year before this.
Well, and also we all took something different from that scene.
Yes.
So depending on who's watching it, it could mean anything.
Exactly. And nowadays, if you were to watch it and not know that whole backstory of those types of films, maybe it would mean absolutely nothing to you.
With this one, if you go into it not knowing it's a werewolf movie, because you can't see him in this scene, you don't really know that he's not anything other than this rapist killer.
Well, you have the
That's true.
You have the vocal cues that
Well,
are supposed to clue you into something happening, and you're sitting in a movie called The Howling.
Well, like I'm saying, like if you're going into it though, like.
But he is trying to make the point that you haven't really lived until you become a murdery rage monster.
Yeah.
I think.
Right.
Is what he's getting at.
He's trying to sell her on that idea. For
Murdery
sure.
rage monster, or just letting go. Because
Possibly.
like as you see further in the film, they're just existing. There's no boundaries. There's no nothing keeping you from being everything that you want to be. In his case, rapist.
The scene also sets up what I think is a problem that occurs later on in the movie. We'll get to. Why he gets her in there, I don't know. Is he wanting to get caught? Maybe.
I think it's because she's on the news.
Yeah.
If he can bring her in, then they could.
They do make a huge point through the whole movie.
Oh, you're that
she's
lady
on the
from
news.
TV. You're
As if we'd forgotten from one moment to the next.
Yes.
But it could be his way to, hey, if this works out, then we could use her to spread the word, make this known. Like.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah.
It's also, I thought, kind of interesting that this is the last police presence we have throughout this entire picture. The cops show up, kind of scratch their heads with their own
kill someone
guns,
and then goes away.
Yeah.
and then they vanish. And it is the TV reporters that do the entire investigation after that. You would think when the body disappears from the morgue,
you got slim pickings, though.
Someone's attention.
But other than that,
The beginning, honestly, like when she's going and she's talking to them from the phone booth, and then the cops are driving by, and even some bits later on, really made me think of Nightcrawler.
Oh.
But I saw it more recently because, like you said, the news people are the ones that are doing it all. It's not really a huge cop-heavy movie, so
excellent movie.
It
by
did
the
make
way.
amazing,
Yeah.
but it did make me think of that. Like, let me get to the scene first so I can get everything before everyone else.
Well, turns out, the TV people had a hell of a lot of lead time then because the cops never show up for any of this stuff as far as
it does kind of just throw you into it, like, because it says, like, he's been calling her.
Right.
So clearly she knew to set this up, but it's like they do kind of just throw you in the mix and kind of expect you to know what's going on with it.
Right.
But we do have that entire scene in the morgue, which gives us the hackiest joke that's ever been made in movies, really, is the coroner who has a cheeseburger sitting next to the dead body and then has to say something like, "Doesn't bother me." This happens in Wolfen
John
also.
Sayles? Yeah.
Yeah, but how many times have we seen that
Yeah.
done?
Or in Legend of the Werewolf, another werewolf film.
God.
Yeah, definitely.
It's just over and over. We can't have a coroner who isn't doing his job while also eating a cheeseburger.
Well, I mean, even
They're
liking this stuff.
desensitized, that's
Well,
the thing.
yeah, because we go through it too. Because people are like, "Oh, you watched that movie while you were eating dinner," and it's like, "Well, yeah, because
It's a movie,
yeah,
though.
it
Yeah,
is
yeah.
what it is."
I'm not watching a corpse being dissected. So there's a big difference, but
It's a
people
weird scene.
can't see that difference usually.
The corpse does disappear. Everybody's shocked. The coroner even's like, "Well, he didn't just get up and walk away." And no police are notified. No one's. That's never mentioned again.
It's true.
It just strikes me as being very, very odd. At this is the point where Dee Wallace-Stone, I can't remember her name in the movie. What was it called?
Karen.
Yeah, whatever. Karen
That female character.
Yeah.
has to go into therapy with a doctor who either works for the TV station, has an office in the TV station.
He's working
One
all
filming
angles.
location.
I mean, he used to be an Avenger, so he's got a lot of connections.
I'm not sure that was a factor, but okay. So,
And he has an ascot, so
well, that's true.
that's a big part of it too.
I
It comes
missed that.
with the doctorate.
I
Yeah,
really
there
should
you
have
go.
taken it
It's
more
very
seriously.
official.
You're right. I really should have taken it more seriously on that one. But the good doctor decides to send our intrepid TV personality to his not at all suspicious colony out in the woods somewhere where John Carradine is.
I want to end it.
which
I
should-
want to end it.
Immediately clue you in that something's about to go terribly wrong. Because John Carradine didn't show up in any movie and good news came out of his mouth. It just didn't happen.
Yeah.
So the first thing I thought when watching this colony stuff when they first get there is, okay, so let me get this straight. There's no patient confidentiality in this doctor's mind at all because he's surrounding his patients with other patients completely unsupervised.
Yes. And they have like a big
True.
cook-off and
They have
get together.
They're having cookout. What kind of therapy exactly is supposed to be happening at this colony?
Food therapy. Actually, it would be like an appetizer because we all know what they're craving.
They have a
course.
They have a house band
Yeah.
that shows up and they have. I don't get it. I don't know.
I do love her reaction at one point when the one lady comes up to her and is like, "We can go over here," and she's like, "No, I'm good. I'll just go over here now."
Yeah.
That was if she just followed that instinct all the way through this movie, that would have been great. They have these bungalows, which are 2-story complexes with driving garages, I guess, or something, and full kitchens. It was a pretty elaborate setup for a colony full of people with very definite problems who are most of the time. I can only guess when the doctor goes back to LA to be on TV that he just leaves them there, or are they kind of on their own?
Yeah, that's the one thing you kind of wonder about. Like, why wouldn't they just go?
Who's second in command at the colony of Nutsos?
I'm guessing it's Slim Pickens as the sheriff,
God,
maybe.
They're in deep trouble.
But
But I took it as in he was sending her in kind of like a retreat manner, not necessarily in a...
Well, they have therapy sessions there.
True.
Though.
That is true. But I never looked at it as in these people couldn't come and go if they... Well, except for the one character. But I
Yeah.
feel like, to me, just watching it, it was... Hey, we can go here, like-minded people. We all have problems. That's it. Because, I
Right.
mean...
support each other.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, this led me to looking at the kind of therapy he was talking about on TV as opposed to what was happening at his colony. During his speeches on TV, what he was getting at reminded me a lot of what was then called primal scream therapy.
Mhm.
And this was a big deal throughout the 70s. John Lennon was a fan. James Earl Jones claimed it cured him of his smoking and hemorrhoids, of all things. It was always very controversial, and it kind of involved what they were talking about, which was the primal scream, maybe not becoming a werewolf necessarily, though that could be a side effect of the therapy, I suppose. But I don't know if there was a direct tie into that, but it had to be on everybody's mind at the time that this was made.
It's a definite dig
relevance
at that.
is there.
Definitely.
Everybody took their digs at primal scream therapy. It was frankly ridiculous.
Well, people take their digs at anything they don't understand because it worked for some people, but a lot of people would be like, "Well, that's
Did it
just."
though?
You can only go by what they had to say about it. I mean, there are people who scoff at people just going and seeing a therapist in general because they don't need it, so therefore they don't understand it. So clearly there's something wrong with it.
Well, therapists have never had an easy time of it in horror movies that I can remember.
No, not typically.
Usually, the brunt or the
first
setup
victim.
for whatever is
the
gonna
first
happen.
one to go down, I think. Yeah.
Well, what movies are you talking about? Go down.
Merely all of them.
Oh, okay. I thought it was a different genre.
No. The whole subgenre.
Pardon me.
Let's kill the therapist horror movies.
Okay.
It's like the trope. You always have that one person that you're like, oh, they're going to introduce him. You know that they're going to go at some point.
Well, really, any figure that has anything to do with any kind of science at all is usually one of the first people up for the kill. I noticed that Karen is allowed to bring her husband.
Oh, what good did that do
her?
her?
Which is and I'm not sure about the husband.
I think it did pretty good.
For him.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Oh, let me, yeah.
Well, see, I don't know if you noticed this, but the guy does not wear a wedding ring at all in the movie.
Honestly,
She
well,
does,
granted, this was
but
in
he does not.
the 80s, but that is more prevalent now than it's ever been.
So
you could say they were ahead of their time, but also he wasn't
I'm
faithful.
not going to say that.
Oh, no, not at all. But I've also known faithful people who wear wedding rings, so
Right.
doesn't really mean...
That's the front.
Yeah.
They got to keep that up.
Maybe he's
right?
like, you knew what was going to happen. I don't wear my ring. Like...
I noticed that right there when he got to the cookout. I was like, when Bertha? What's the? I don't remember.
I just want to see what other B names you come up with.
Oh no! Wait, no.
Because she leads him astray almost immediately.
Okay.
He's got an eye on this woman
Oh,
almost.
Marsha.
Right,
Marsha.
Marsha.
Yeah.
That starts with a B in some cultures.
Yeah.
Because I thought you meant the weird, really nice lady. That's who I thought you meant.
In the original Swedish, it's spelled with a B. I promise. But this leads to one of the oddest scenes I think that's in the movie, which is, what do I do with this rabbit and that whole thing?
Yeah. What do you guys do with these things?
Which I gotta play here because this.
You see any wolves? Nope. Just lots of rabbits. What do you do with these things? Eat them. Oh. My sister will cook it up for you if you want. No, I try to stay away from meat. Your wife might like it. You kill something you don't eat, now that's a sin. Yeah, well, I never thought of it like that. The plate's just over there. My sister will be glad to cook it up for you. Are you sure? Marcia just loves to cook. Okay. You sure?
Oh, what the hell was that?
He didn't want to impose.
All right.
Was he just going to carry the rabbit around with him for the rest of the movie?
Well, my thing is if you don't eat meat, why are you just going to kill a rabbit?
That is a.
He's trying to fit in with the locals.
He already has the mustache.
With murder. Okay.
Yeah.
He already has a giant bushy mustache. What else is he?
The boys are calling me. Have you seen the boys?
He's got his Land's End parka on. He's got his. Well, I mean, what the hell? But he gets up there and he resists.
Yes.
And by the way, I thought the cans of Wolf brand chili they left scattered
that was very great.
So great.
Were a very nice touch.
Yeah.
The art department was on their game right there. I wonder about their relationship. I don't know if they were really husband and wife or if that was something only she was into. I'm not really sure.
Well, it happens.
Because this does lead us in, which I don't have a clip of, thank God, is one of the weirder sex scenes I think I've seen.
Thank God. Why don't you have a clip for that?
I have.
They had a
animated
choreographer.
Sex scene I've
They
ever
had a
seen.
special choreographers in the credits.
Just for that scene.
I mean, it's not
That's going to be a cool job, though. Like, I choreographed.
It's not as cringe-inducing to me as, say, Don't Look Now, where I have to have one hand kind of blocking out the Donald Sutherland part of the screen.
I need to see that.
While I'm seeing that. Be prepared to have one hand.
Oh, I've heard about the scene. That scene and then the one in Delamarte Delmore. Those are, like, evidently iconic sex scenes.
Yeah.
Well, that and the room. The room you could throw in there also.
Don't Look Now is a rain jacket movie in more ways than one. So there you go.
Do you want to elaborate on that, or you?
I'm not gonna. No spoilers. No.
No. Well, we should also mention that you mentioned the guy from The Thing, Dick Miller.
Yes.
That guy, Dick Miller, also shows up in this movie. It's like all of Corman's usual people.
Well, Joe Dante
Corman himself shows up in this movie.
Yes, at the phone booth.
But
that was his lucky charm. Joe Dante would always have him from Hollywood Boulevard onward, and he was in Piranha prior to this.
Sure.
Yeah.
But also, a lot of people miss this, is that when we get to the bookstore scene with Dick Miller, who is classic Dick Miller, we also get a cameo by Forrest J. Ackerman, who's then senior editor of Famous Monsters magazine.
Holding a Famous Monsters magazine in his hand. Yes.
We start with the tarot cards that spell sci-fi, if you're looking very closely.
That's right. He coined that term, by the way. Yeah.
He has no lines in the movie, but in Famous Monsters, he said, look for the guy who looks like a poor man's Vincent Price, kind of standing in the background, who's holding a special magazine you may recognize. But yes, Forrest J. Ackerman shows up and is... it's an odd cameo I wouldn't have expected.
But it's very welcome, too, because it's an in-joke for people who know who he is. Most people that wouldn't
Who would know
have
what
known.
he looked like, though?
Well, he'd already done Dracula versus Frankenstein back in 1971 for Al Adamson, and he had lines in that.
Oh, dear.
Yeah. With Zandor Vorkov, who played Dracula. And, yeah. Not his real name. Not his real name.
Oh, that's a damn shame, because that's a great name.
But it's brilliant. He's like he's driving his car, and all of a sudden Dracula pops up right next to him, and he's like, oh, who are you? And it's, but that's just the gist of it.
So she starts losing her connection to her, I'm putting in quotes here, husband, and in desperation calls her other TV reporter friend to come out to the colony. Nobody has a problem with this, even though she's not a patient in any
Well,
way.
that's kind of why I took it as more of like a retreat thing, because people just come and go as they
it
please.
Definitely
Like it's
has
not
that,
it's not like lockdown.
They have patients there.
I know, I understand that, but it's more lax than maybe like an actual mental facility.
You can't
or
have a
things
retreat,
like that.
a peaceful retreat with John Carradine. It's not. That is never going to happen.
I mean,
and you say he was no hunter.
The word eventually gets out. There's wolves. There's something attacking people, and we get really into the meat of this movie, where our TV reporters have raced to the scene. They're trying to save each other. We get our first great werewolf transformation.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's all just puffy little sacks under the guy's skin, and it doesn't all happen completely on camera. But at that point, that was the best werewolf transformation on film.
For the next month or so.
I was gonna say, but they were like, oh, damn.
Yeah.
Yeah, I made a note of that as like, Ron Borst of Hollywood Silver Screen declared it the best werewolf transformation scene ever done.
Since Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein.
And I have written next to that is until August.
Exclamation point.
Did he go back and amend his review?
Probably there was no retraction made as far as I could tell. No, I couldn't find that in my research.
Yeah. And, a lot of people criticize that moment in the film because Karen just sits there and lets it happen.
And watches the entire time.
But I always argue she is a reporter.
Well, that, and it's really funny when people are like, I can't believe they're just sitting there. In traumatic experiences, you don't know what you're going to do.
Exactly.
It's easy to go, oh, don't run upstairs. But,
well, you could do something.
We can't all be,
Plus, she has already been through something because she's here for
she's traumatized.
PTSD or whatever. So it adds to it.
No, not the one Eddie kills.
Well, that's Belinda Blasky's character. Yeah.
Well,
the actual full-on transformation is in view of Karen.
Yeah.
Right.
She sees it, but we don't see it. The Belinda Blasky moment. It's in shadows.
Yeah, you don't see his transformation in front of her character.
He gets taller.
Honestly,
in fact,
you don't.
He's full-on werewolf.
No, because she's running from him, but the first time you see him is when he busts his hand through the door on her.
Crazy-ass Wile E. Coyote ears coming off of his head. Yeah. I mean, that's pretty good.
But I thought we were talking about the other,
the
one, like
That is also the point in the movie where it kind of loses itself. This starts to turn into
easy.
As far as I can tell, it starts to try to become a comedy after that.
But do we see it as a comedy because we're watching it now? Was it meant as a comedy?
No, it was always it always had. That's John Sayles' writing
But I know it doesn't really quite get there. I mean, you have that was it Robert Picardo, I think, improvised the line, "I want to give you a piece of my mind," before he pulls the bullet out of his head. And they could have left it there. But then it starts to dissolve into more of a comedy. And this is not something that Joe Dante would get quite right until Gremlins, I didn't think.
Well, I don't know. I think the entire movie has that tone to me because the movie's like a big in-joke anyway for horror fans.
Well, maybe I would have enjoyed it more had I viewed it that way.
Yeah.
Because I don't...
Maybe that
and it
could
is
be the
hard
turn off for
sometimes
people.
to watch movies that were made in a different time and know how to view them.
Right.
Because,
well, people didn't know it back then either.
Well, it's like
They didn't know
watching
what to
the
expect.
original Evil Dead.
Well, they certainly didn't expect this particular scene right here.
Come on,
Take it easy, pal. You know, not all of us got enough money for a Mazda. Some of us have to work for a living. You know what I mean?
Look, I'm in a hurry here. This is an emergency.
What? Okay.
I'm Dennis Dugan over here.
Were you expecting a Mazda joke to pop up in the middle of... And what?
No, but once you see it, you're
What was
like,
it about
it always
Mazdas?
should have been there.
Mazdas
right?
were higher end. I remember, like, when I was younger, my mom's like, we got a Mazda 3, and that was a big deal. Like, I mean...
Wow.
Yeah.
See, I have no memory of that whatsoever about Mazdas being a big deal. I mean, it has the pop-up headlights.
Well, yeah. Well, even now, people are, like, the more coupe-looking ones, people are like, oh, man, they have a Mazda. So, evidently, Mazdas are still a big deal. To some.
But in the werewolf colony, would they be?
Mazdas? No, they probably wouldn't care. Which they evidently
fit
did
in
In the city.
after they
it's a
trashed
big
the
deal.
hell out of this car by the time it gets to
Also,
That's
as a
true.
news
They didn't have
reporter,
an
are
affinity
you
for
making...
Mazdas whatsoever.
As a news reporter, are you making big bucks?
Maybe not TV.
This is
local TV.
This is the
the
lower,
evidence-
higher end.
Right.
The evidence is right before you. The man has a Mazda.
True.
Yeah.
What
The
was
guy
I
pumping
thinking?
gas is just a working man. He doesn't work at a TV station.
He also looks like he doesn't have
Isn't that
pants
amazing?
on.
In this incredible 15-second scene, I think we learned so much about these characters that we didn't know before.
Well, also, I learned that I was like, when you watch the beginning of that scene, you're like, I wonder if he has a horn in that automobile. And he does.
Wow.
In that moment.
Glad we got some resolution there.
Dugan with the horning.
Expecting. So
They should have called it the horning.
the horning.
Well, I mean, that fits in so many ways.
There's
That's true.
probably is.
Marsha, I
Wasn't-
mean,
Yeah.
The porn parody of this might have been called the horning.
Yeah. I always liked Crazy Magazine's parody of this, which was called The Yowling.
The Howling.
I just love that.
What was Mad? What did they? I don't remember what they.
The crazy cover was great because they did the cover art to the movie, but it had Obnoxio the clown coming through instead of the werewolf.
So our intrepid TV reporter, not the cops, the TV reporter
in
has
his Mazda.
has his silver bullets. He's got a rifle. He has a Mazda.
Thanks to Dick Miller.
He's headed to the scene, and this is where I just couldn't understand what was supposed to be happening in this movie anymore. Now, I'll explain why after we get the doctor's explanation here about what it is his idea was here.
It's a mistake to bring her to the colony.
We should have stuck with the old ways. Raising cattle for our feed. Where's the life in that?
The humans are our cattle.
Humans are our prey. We should feed on them like we always done. Screw all this channel your energies crap.
But the danger of exposure. We need this shelter to plan, to catch up with society. Times have changed, and we haven't. Not enough.
Shut up, Doc. You wouldn't listen to me. None of you. We can fit in, you said. We can live with them. You make me sick.
Marsha.
Oh, you're through, Doc. She's ours now.
Okay, so if you're concerned about exposure, as he has just said, why do you invite a famous TV reporter to your secret colony of wolf people? And then allow her friend, who is also a TV reporter, to come to your secret colony of wolf people. Are werewolves stupid? I don't know what's supposed to be happening here.
Well,
What was
there's
the
a
plan?
responsibility
What was
that
the
he
plan?
feels for her, though, too, because Eddie Quist kind of
And that's the
brought
other
that
thing.
on.
They had to know this entire time what Eddie had been up to. They had to know he was out there
Sneaking around,
being
doing
the
his
killy
shit.
rage
Yeah,
monster,
yeah.
but they did nothing about it. They didn't rein him in. He was welcome.
He
back
was
to
what
the
they call a
colony.
wild card in the werewolf colony.
Wild card.
So, damn that Quist got out of his shack again. He's banging broads and ripping throats.
But you see what I mean. I mean, the doctor, they're out there. They're worried about the risk of exposing their colony to the outside world. Yet, Eddie's going to do what Eddie's going to do. He's caught the attention of the TV reporters. Let's just bring him out here.
Yeah.
It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I'm not sure it's supposed to.
Well, I think it's also trying to control the chaos. So now they've added another...
They did an excellent job.
They're trying. He's trying, at least. That is... I didn't say he didn't enlist a barn burning scenario, but yeah, he's trying to keep it.
But you were saying they didn't listen to poor Martha with a B because she's a woman.
Marsha. There's a lot of not great woman comments in this whole movie. Like in the beginning, like when she gets pulled off the air because she can't focus, he's like on the phone and the studio manager or whatever producer, and he's like
Kevin McCarthy.
Maybe she's pregnant or something. And I was
Kevin
just
McCarthy.
like, because there's a lot of comments and things like that throughout this whole film where it's just like, oh yay, pro women. It's just the one comment in the beginning really stuck out to me. Because it's like, oh, the only reason a woman can't do her work right is because clearly she's pregnant. And it's like...
Well, they've been around this woman too. Would you listen to her necessarily? And not just because she's a woman.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, something happened to her too.
She's not John Carradine.
So we're just talking about a credibility source.
Right.
Yeah.
Possibly. I mean, he has an ascot. She doesn't have an ascot.
That's true, but maybe she could have had one if things went better at the colony. And he was trying to get her an ascot. He had one on order, and she didn't stick around long enough. She blew shit up.
Is that what, if you successfully complete your therapy, they give you an ascot?
That could be, but although no one else in the colony has one, so I don't know that anyone has successfully achieved their therapy.
I'm wondering how long John Carradine was in therapy out there, because he probably started the place.
That's a good point.
May have been
because and he's very anti the new way of doing things here with the.
We should be feeding on people and not cattle.
I love that comment anyway because
it's so much easier to get people out here than cattle or something. I don't know.
Well, I mean, but we feed on cattle, so it's kind of just interchangeable.
Oh yeah,
people
it's very.
are cattle.
The whole movie is a bunch of digs at society and what we.
Well, going back into how they tailspin into a comedy though, also. Slim Pickens with wolf teeth is not necessarily frightening.
No. And I would argue the same thing with Carradine when you first see him, but although I do like the werewolf version of him that you see briefly as the barn's on fire. Yeah. That's really cool.
I was waiting for Slim Pickens to get out of his cop car with the gun and go, "Stop! I got me wolf teeth," or something like that.
Well, honestly, even when he's talking to the guy about the rabbit, his mouth is weird too. Like, nobody really has
a decent mouth.
He's got some fangs already.
Yeah.
So
I wonder that's why he has that weird jacket vest thing, because it's furry.
They not only need mental therapy, but also a good dental program in the wolf colony would help also.
They also have a dentist office in the studio where the news is filmed with the therapist's office.
Yeah. Sure. Well, back to we end at the news studio. We end where we began. And... Okay, so the guy manages to drag a rifle into the TV station, and no one asks him, "Hey, what's the rifle for?" or anything like that. He just he has it on him.
It's America.
Karen goes through her whole speech and then transforms into what I can only assume is a Chihuahua or some other kind of very small dog.
Yeah.
She definitely looked a lot different than the rest.
Than Marsha or anyone else.
She didn't turn into a werewolf. She turned into like a Lhasa Apso or something.
She can't help it,
what okay? Was that?
Is there...
I mean, granted, they probably put most of the budget,
everything else.
A $1 million budget, from what I've read, into everything else, and like, oh crap, we have to transform Karen. Who has a dog?
Take some of the fur and stick it to her.
And put the dog on camera. We'll blur it out and we'll put some Vaseline on the lens. It'll look fine. It'll look great.
It's a deliberate move, but we don't know exactly why. Yeah. It was a creative choice for certain.
After all these years, we still don't understand exactly what the filmmakers had in mind by turning poor Karen into the
least intimidating werewolf ever. Yeah.
At the end of this movie.
Like Teen Wolf would be more intimidating, maybe. Or Teen Wolf's dad, James Hampton.
James Hampton, yes.
Very lovable looking werewolf. Yeah.
So you didn't like The Howling very much, although you may grow to like it in the future.
I really don't know if I want to watch it again. I've already seen it twice because I fell asleep the first time. But I do own it now, so I did try to find the book of
So
it.
now you'll feel compelled.
Because I was curious as to the similarities there, but there's no audio of it.
Well, this wasn't based on a novel, was it?
Yes, it was. Gary
By the same
Brandner
name?
wrote it in 77.
So there was probably an original novel, the movie, then the novelization of the movie.
There's 3. It's a trilogy. The
he wrote the
original book
first
series.
2 before the movie was even made. And it was called The Howling 2, or it has an
What they call
optional
The
title.
Howling 2,
Like
Your
Return
Sister's
of
a
the
Werewolf.
Howling is the other
Return to
title.
the Howling.
Return of the Howling.
Escape from Howling Mountain.
Yeah, that was. But no, the producer optioned the book, and they wrote a screenplay which was somewhat closer to the book. And then by the time Avco Embassy became involved, they didn't want that script, and they went and got Joe Dante on board, and then he brought on John Sayles, who he'd worked with on Piranha. So they restructured it and made it more, I don't want to say conventional, but it's a different. No, but it's more of a conventional.
It's more accessible, probably.
Yeah, maybe, but at the same time, it's very much in jokey as a reference to those guys being involved.
Maybe I will watch it again because I'd like to watch it with the angle of it being comedic, because I never once took, like, even the scene with the Mazda bit. I never, like, I didn't see the humor in it.
Yeah.
Like. It was intended to be funny. It's not one of those, we're watching it so many years later and it's comedic now.
Right.
Like, it was intended then to be funny.
So The Howling had a pretty successful weekend. It was number 1 on its opening weekend. It lost that number 1 slot the next week to Caveman.
Hell yeah.
Second week of release.
Ringo Starr.
People thinking,
and Barbara Bach. That's when they first met.
Do we see the Wolf movie or the one where Ringo Starr flops around in dinosaur poop? Clear call there. So let me set the scene for you now where we are. You're a teenager. You have money to spend on movies. You have a selection of things to see. This is what's been going on this year. Now, My Bloody Valentine came out in February. It was probably out of theaters completely at this point, because it is.
Maybe.
Watching
like you said earlier,
a Valentine's Day movie in May doesn't make a lot of sense. Omen 3, which came in March.
The Final Conflict.
Had probably run its course. It wasn't terribly popular to begin with.
It wasn't. It's the lesser of the 3.
April 12, The Howling comes out, followed by Caveman, or Caveman was the week before, depending on what market you were in.
Yeah.
Friday the 13th Part 2 hits in May. Happy Birthday to Me, which immediately got forgotten.
J. Lee Thompson.
Is in theaters, roaming around out there somewhere. And then June hits. You had Raiders of the Lost Ark, Superman 2, For Your Eyes Only, Escape from New York, and then Wolfen. You're kind of getting the impression I didn't like Wolfen all that much at this point, I think.
Wolfen a lot.
I dig Wolfen. I do.
I was also really happy that Gregory Hines was in it.
So
yeah,
I
love Gregory Hines.
So Michael Wadley, who's the director on this, had no feature film credits before this and has had none after this.
No.
That I could find.
Michael Wadley?
Yeah, the director of this movie.
He directed Woodstock.
He was a cinematographer on Woodstock.
I mean, he did, all his movies were documentaries. He'd not done like a formal.
So how does he get this gig?
I don't know.
How on earth does he get put in charge of a $17 million movie based on a short documentary he made about Janis Joplin 10 years before? This is the thing I could have never figured out.
It's possibly one of those, a person who knows a person.
Was he friends with the writer? Because we had Whitley Strieber, who also wrote The Hunger.
Right.
Wrote this movie, or wrote the novel that it was based on, and I think wrote the screenplay on this.
And The Wolfen was the name of the novel, and that was his first novel.
Yeah. It's strange. There seemed to be a lot of names attached to this. I mean, Dustin Hoffman wanted in on this movie for some reason.
I'd heard that.
But the director desperately wanted Albert Finney, who was not an unknown name at the time, and certainly wasn't afterwards. I mean, 2 years after this, he was Daddy Warbucks in Annie, of all things.
Yeah.
He was...
The following year.
He was up for the Academy Award for Under the Volcano a couple of years after this.
Yeah.
So...
I wonder if it was one of those, maybe he was a fan of the book and expressed interest in making it, and it went forward from there.
Yeah.
Possibly, I don't know.
It was a troubled production, from what I understand, is that he delivered like a a Woodstock style
hour-long cut.
And then
I'd watch that before I'd watch the Howling again.
Wow.
That's how much I enjoyed Wolfen.
4.5 hours.
Yeah.
It's hard to imagine.
And the rumor is he was removed from the project, and they brought John Hancock in, who had done Bang the Drum Slowly, which ironically, he started Jaws 2 and was fired from Jaws 2 and replaced by Janot Zawark just 3 years prior to that. But anyway, he had done the reshoots, and you can kind of see it when you're watching the movie. The tone is a little off here and there, but
yeah, it's fair.
He doesn't talk about the movie, like, there's no commentaries out there for it. So,
wow.
Yeah.
First thing I want to discuss is what in the hell is going on with Albert Finney's hair? It's gigantic in this movie. It was so distracting.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like he had extra hair glued onto his normal hair throughout this thing.
He just doesn't give a fuck.
Moved on its own.
We know by his pastry consumption.
He spends the first 20 minutes of this movie eating something.
Yes.
It's either cookies or pastries.
I think that's why I love it.
And he
20
grumbles a
minutes
lot.
in the morning waking up.
He doesn't have a hell of a lot of lines full stop in this thing.
No.
He stays pretty quiet and just kind of glares at people.
Yeah.
And grumbles at them quite a bit.
So maybe that's why the hair took a weird turn, because he didn't have a lot of dialogue. They wanted to give him a more abrasive look.
The hair speaks for me.
Yeah.
Was it? I don't know.
Plus, it was the 80s. People had big hair.
Yeah.
So we have our opening scene, which was the rich couple getting killed while they're looking at a windmill. And this is where maybe there was a difference in vision on this picture, because we get this whole thing with the Haitian bodyguard. They specifically mention he was a Haitian wearing a voodoo ring when they find him the next day. That whole topic comes up and then is immediately dropped. Like, I don't know if that was supposed to be a thing.
Yeah, it could have been.
Or
they go through they make a point of showing all this weird imagery that's up on the windmill and on the ring, and then none of it is ever seen again. I don't know if that was in one of the hours that got cut out of this, but it's hard to tell.
The only thing I for sure would believe that was Wadley's vision for sure and was cut, and it depends on which version you see, is the bar scene. Tom Waits is actually in the movie. You hear his music in the background, but he's in there performing, and you can find it in some versions. It's not on the Blu-ray, it's not on the DVD, it wasn't in the TV version, but evidently
is a rights thing maybe, or
no, the music's there though. So he's actually performing it live, and you hear it in the background of the scene between Albert Finney and Diane Venora.
You can use the music, but don't look at me.
Yeah,
don't look at
me. But I mean, having his history with like all these documentaries about music, I'm sure that was something he pushed for, and maybe the producers were like, "That's not important to us."
Yeah, because for him it was important.
Right.
They tricked him somehow into thinking it was a musical, and
yeah, I don't know.
I mean, he is in things. I don't think it's necessarily,
but not so much at that point.
Yeah.
But he had done One for the Heart like a couple years later. And
so we open our police investigation the next day in the park, where we get our introduction to Gregory Hines. Albert Finney and his hair approach this crime scene.
What about Gregory Hines' hair? Maybe he's competing with his hair. Did you think about that?
You think there was in the contract, maybe?
It might be.
My hair has to be bigger than everyone else on this set.
Top billing.
Yeah.
Literal top billing.
So when they find the dead wife, this is one thing I wanted to point out, and one of the problems I had almost with the movie as a whole. We'll tell you what I mean.
Now, ain't this a shame? Bizarre, man. It's almost severed her head.
It was instantaneous?
Instantaneous. You see the chicken run around with his head cut off? And nobody ever thinks about the head. During the French Revolution, when they chopped the heads off, they quick pick them up out of the basket and look them in the face. But most went out right away in shock. Every fifth head or so was alive, wide awake. Eyes blinking, mouth trying to say something.
Yeah, sure.
Brain can live without oxygen for more than a minute. That's a long time, buddy boy. How'd you like to see your own body and know you're dead?
Give me a nice death in bed. Preferably with a partner.
You can take her away now. Be careful with her. Yes.
So you're doing a werewolf movie, right? You're doing a horror movie. You get your first big kill of the movie, and you don't show anything. We only see this woman from behind. They talk about her injuries, but this is kind of a no-no in horror movies. You don't do that. How do you do that? How do you get away with that?
Well, the other thing is that there's very fleeting moments throughout the movie when there is gore on screen. If there's a severed head moment that's like, yeah, it is. It's too great that you want to see more.
Could it be because it was the first kill and they didn't want to necessarily go too hard, too quick?
Where we lead up to the horrendous stuff.
Because at this point you don't really, like you see the guy's hand get cut off.
Kind of.
Yeah.
Well, because it goes flying.
Yeah.
But you don't really, they're like, let's ease into it. Because at this point, I mean, yes, the title does have wolf in it, but you don't necessarily know what you're in for.
They don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's
so it's kind of like, we don't want to make it, because they are making it seem like, because if you read the synopsis, it's like animal attacks. So it is kind of, it escalates. That's the word I'm looking for.
Yes.
Because as they get more and more bodies, it does become more graphic.
That's true.
Which could also, moving forward, I'm not going to go into it, but the escalation of the particular person doing it. Maybe in the beginning it was, oh, this is just what this is. I don't want to necessarily draw attention. And then by the end, they're pissed and they're like, oh, we'll just go.
Well, it's never clear who's involved in this. It's not made explicit that they're
that's what I'm saying.
Werewolves.
Maybe in the beginning, it was meant to be under the radar.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we're going to kill these two because of all this. But if we make it look like this, then it's not going to necessarily be investigated.
Yeah, I just got the impression that they were going to shoot this and say, don't worry, we'll come back with some insert shots after the fact when we get the makeup worked out, and then just didn't do it.
If there is a 4.5 hour cut, there's a possibility that a more gruesome scene did exist, but we never got that cut.
Or did he not want to do that at all, and that's what they brought another director in for?
That's a possibility too.
We need
because,
gore.
like you said, we don't have anything to go by with him, because it's not like he had other films where it's like, oh, he didn't get into gory stuff too much, or holy shit, he loves gore.
He'd certainly seen a horror movie before, and they certainly had to know as a production crew that this was a high time for slasher films.
Oh, I understand
had Friday the 13th Part 2 also.
But you also...
This is the year of the slasher
This
film,
is your direct
81,
competition in the box office.
True.
You gotta give them something.
Right.
But would we have known, not we, but would they have known that their competition was going to be My Bloody Valentine or Friday the 13th? Because you figure production times could have been running at the same time.
These were frequently gentlemen's agreements that they had made for years, going well into the 2000s, where studios would agree not to release competing pictures with each other.
Well, I know that exists now. I didn't necessarily know if it was back then as well.
Especially when you've got $17 million on the line here, which they did with Wolfen.
But even competing with Friday the 13th Part 2 or whatever else that was out there at that point, I also feel like the movie is of this ilk. Because whenever I think of this movie, I think of the book, and I think of going to the bookstore as a kid, and there were so many movies based on books horror-wise at that point. Probably, Ghost Story is a big one that I always correlate the two of those, even though that has probably more gore in that one. But it's more of a thriller, suspense, slow burn.
I was going to say that as well. It's more accessible when it's not full-on gore.
Right.
Because somebody who's not necessarily... Horror can encompass a bunch, but somebody might be more apt to see a psychological thriller than, say, a horror film. Granted, that falls in the same genre, but somebody may see, I can't think of a title right now, but something that's not, it's tense and it's suspenseful, but it's not gory.
Yeah, it's a taste.
Yeah, it's a little bit,
a safeguard
it's dip your toe in the water.
And that's why you have someone like Albert Finney leading it as well. You're going to get people who are, coming to it from that aspect. So
it just makes it more accessible. Not necessarily to people who love gore, but for somebody like you said that may have read the book going, hey, I would see that movie because I read the book.
Yeah.
Would this have been better then as a late fall release instead of a summer movie release?
In today's market, absolutely.
Even then,
but
possibly.
there's so many movies that kind of just did very little business maybe back then.
Well,
they were just, but at the same time, we look at it like they were successful, but they weren't really at the time.
Right.
Not that this one really was.
No,
but
it definitely was not.
This
Also,
was one that was bigger on cable and home video and TV, I think.
And it may have been planned for a later release, and then they go, no.
Maybe they would have had a clearer path of it. I mean, when
or earlier had the film gone the way they wanted from the beginning. Yeah.
That's one thing we'll never necessarily know the
They could have
details
just
of.
dumped it in the
And
theaters.
it may have been even earlier because of all the cutting.
Possibly.
Like,
Well, getting into that fall, you would have had a much clearer path of it. I mean, you had Halloween 2, which came out that fall, but then Time Bandits was your most direct competition, probably, as a genre picture. Maybe Sharky's Machine. I don't know.
Hell yeah.
Which was number 1 throughout the month of December that year.
Rightfully so.
Rightfully so.
Actually, rightly so, not rightfully, sorry.
So the only thing I could think of that might have gone and padded out a 4.5-hour cut were the endless point of view shots of our wolves.
Yeah.
I loved it. Wolf Vision is my favorite.
I liked it the first couple of times it happened. The 3 dozen or so after that started to wear me out.
I loved it.
Because it kind of presents the wolves as being about the size of a house cat in some cases.
They could have been head down. Like
the
down.
POV could have thought.
Like, I can't tell you this.
Could have thought that out a bit more.
Our director here, Michael Wadley, was quoted that year in Famous Monsters magazine, saying the following, and I quote, "The Wolfen are a threat to the characters in the film, but they are also threatened by modern-day society and technology. Their auditory, ocular, and olfactory senses are acutely developed, infinitely more sensitive to a power of 10 than ours. To visualize that superiority, I felt a considerable amount of footage had to be shot from the creature's viewpoint." No kidding.
It sold me, though.
Is half an hour at least in this movie.
That's written in my notes, actually. I was like, Wolf Vision, yes.
She wants that as the extra on the Blu-ray.
I loved it. What if that's all the extra, the extra 2 hours is just, it's the same movie as Told by the Wolf.
Told from the wolf's point of view.
Jason's on board. I could tell.
Yes, let's do the entire movie from the wolf's point of view. There's no dialogue. He just
it would be a first time kind of thing. You know?
I also love that the sex scene is all in the wolf's vision. We got a peeping Tom wolf.
I completely blocked the sex scene from my mind.
I just watched this morning, so it's a little fresher in my head than everything else.
Yeah, the sex scene. Yeah, I suppose you have to do it.
I was kind of pissed that scene was in there because you should be able to have a female character without them having a sex scene. Just throwing that out there.
Yeah, and they've spent a total of in terms of the movie, those two characters had been in contact with each other for what, 2.5 days?
That's all it takes, Jason.
When you're Albert Finney.
Look at that. Look at the
It's the hair.
With the headband he's got on. He's got the sweats on. He's got the pastries.
And they were startled at that moment because he had just run in from something happening.
Is that all it takes?
Sometimes,
a bandana and a good
It's the big
startle?
hair. The big hair.
We've learned something about Katie
Chicks
here today,
dig big hair. Oh my god. This is what I'm here for.
Well, she should have hooked up with Gregory Hines then.
I mean, I agree.
And look, can we just talk about how awesome he is and how sad it is that he's gone now?
Yeah.
He's one of those actors that you're like, why did he die so young?
He was great in Deal of the Century, which was right around this time, I think.
Friedkin, 84.
84, really? Was it that late?
Or was it 83? Maybe in 83, but yeah, it was after this. He had only done History of the World Part 1 as far as films. And I think that was released first, so I don't know if Wolfen was made before that. But judging from the size of his role in Wolfen, I would think History of the World Part 1 was probably the first one. But yeah, I love him.
Mm-hmm.
And
I was very happy, and I was happy that he was in it more than I thought he was going to be.
Yeah, because you initially think it's just one-shot deal. Yeah, it could have been like the John Sayles and Howling. He's only in that one scene, you know. But yeah.
And all of he's just great. His dialogue's great. Everything's great.
Yes. Yeah. And when first time I ever saw this movie was in 85 when it premiered on ABC Network.
Oh dear.
Yeah. And a lot was cut. A lot didn't need to be cut, but at the same time, it still creeped the hell out of me. And his scene in particular scared the shit out of me because I loved him. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Because I was like, oh shit, he's gonna get it. He's doomed. And,
I guessed that second they showed him on screen.
Well, yeah.
Our science figure was clearly the one who's going to be doomed first because traditional horror, you have to kill off the science guy, even though I'm not really sure how sciencey he really is.
But inadvertently, he could even be considered a science guy
Right.
Science and medicine.
Got a lot of he brings a lot of the context to the film. He's
So we do get our first encounter with Science Guy right here.
Your labels for these are amazing.
With all the psychos running around New York, you're trying to pin this on an endangered species?
Could a wolf do that?
You're serious? No way, these aren't animal wounds.
Could you train a wolf?
Then it wouldn't be a wolf. Absolutely not. See, people kill people. Wolves don't kill people, that's a myth. I mean, they're too smart. They're like Indians. Wolves and Indians evolved and were destroyed simultaneously. Their societies are practically one and the same. They're tribal, they look out for their own, they don't overpopulate, and they're superb hunters.
Are you serious?
I love the juxtaposition of that, though. Because I remember, like, when I was first watching it, I was like, is this wolves or is it, like, shapeshifters? Like, because I had guessed that before we even get to the end of it. And with his speech, for lack of a better word, I like the correlation between, oh, you're going to blame this on an endangered animal? Yeah. When if you think about the tribulations of Native Americans anyway, it's like you have that.
Well, I'm going to circle back around to the endangered species thing a little later.
The Robert Urich film?
Yes, of course. What else? You know how much I've been dying to bring up Robert Urich in normal conversation.
As usual, it's always
this is my moment.
Spencer for Hire. Jeez.
But yes, the shape-shifting thing. So one of the cardinal rules of a werewolf movie is you have to show the transformation.
But why?
Because otherwise you get this.
But
that's the one thing people are going for in a werewolf movie is you have to do the transformation.
But like you even said a few minutes ago, is this even a werewolf movie?
1 hour into this, the closest thing we get is a naked Edward James almost transforming into something on a beach, but instead more or less running around like he just took a hit of angel dust.
So he went from zoot suit to birthday suit.
And then tells Dewey, it's all in your head. But you're expecting this transformation to happen, and it doesn't. It feels like a bit of a letdown.
I get that.
He should go full manimal at that point and just...
Oh, a little Simon McCorkindale. Okay.
I don't know. I never...
You know how much I've been dying to bring up Simon McCorkindale.
I love Simon McCorkindale, god dang it.
And Manimal.
Hell yeah, Jaws 3D, baby.
Jaws 3D.
Philip Fitzroyce.
That's right. Man, that guy had a career, didn't he?
He did.
For about...
He had a long form career, but like as far as like hit movies, yeah.
I think the reason I like the fact that there isn't a transformation scene, whether they are wolves or aren't wolves, is it does give you that less is more, and I like that with movies. I love that I didn't like the Howling, and you don't like this one, and there's that like.
I'm not saying I was in love with the Howling. I just think it's a better werewolf movie than the Wolfen is.
Well. But that's just what she's saying is it a werewolf movie? Now, you could look at the book one way and look at the movie differently, but this one kind of keeps it vague on purpose. And also, even if it is a werewolf movie, it's the werewolf movie without that transformation that year. Because why not be different?
Good ones.
Yeah,
like
you
one
got some
really good one and then an okay one.
Yeah. So, like, why go that route? Why even try to... Compete. We could give you an alternate type of film, you know?
That's a cop-out.
What if there is a transformation scene and it's either A, from the wolf's point of view, or it's in the cut of it?
Yeah, but why the hell would you cut that?
That would be
because maybe it looked like shit, and they were like, "Oh no, never mind."
No.
That seems more likely to me, actually.
That one, I
He's
love
just seeing his fingernails expand.
He's looking
like,
in a mirror, or.
But I also like the idea that they aren't.
Christian Slater on SNL is like, "Oh, it's hard to talk with wolf teeth," and then ducks back out
that's one of the best sketches ever. I forgot all about that. Yes,
that could have been it. I don't know. You had 3 hours or so cut out of this thing. It could have ended up in there somewhere.
But I'm also envisioning, even if it isn't a werewolf, that what if it is Edward James almost in the nude running around killing people just like that?
Like an animalistic urge.
He's just got he's
it
possessed
is a
by
wolf, but not. Yeah. Kind of like when he was talking in The Howling, where you're like, or her at the end when she's like, it's the monsters in all of us, and then she does the transfer.
And it's not necessarily just Edward James almost, but just in general.
Whomever. One thing I forgot to mention that I'm going to tie into this later on, was they got an astonishing amount of mileage out of that set, which was just the burned out Bronx, the old church.
I loved the way it looked.
Which was a Black Caesar did a lot of that also when it was shot there. It's hard to imagine an entire section of a modern city just leveled like that, but the Bronx was like that for a long time. And I pulled a picture off Google Earth views, of Google Street View, that we'll put up on the website that shows what that corner where the church is looks like now. And you couldn't tell that anything was ever there. It's just completely different, which kind of made me think, okay, so at the beginning they kill the rich guy. This is going to be a movie about gentrification, but then it kind of leaves that behind until we get closer to the end, where our beloved hero and our beloved hero's hair and his new friend are up in
Diane Venora, who's great.
The wolves have somehow scaled the 15 floors up to the top of this building and broken in through a window.
Well, they go up as a human and then transform into a wolf.
Would they turn into Spider-Man? How do they go up?
He showed, I mean, even when he crawled up to the bridge, he told him, he's like, you can go talk to him, and he's like, where are the stairs? And he's like, there are no stairs. So it shows that character
the bridge is a little bit different.
But still, I mean, you don't know what he's capable of.
Ladies, there's only one of me.
So yeah, he gets up there. He's confronted by a half dozen or so wolves, but I'm getting a little bit ahead here. Where's the...
Are you talking about with him and her, or the Gregory Hines scene?
The Gregory Hines scene took place in the old church.
Yeah, but they had to get up there as well. I just want to make sure I'm picturing the right scene.
There were probably stairs.
Oh, okay.
But after Gregory Hines gets offed in one of our big kills in the movie, a shell-shocked...
After he gets off, or
yes,
gets offed?
Yeah. So there's been this horribly traumatic scene, and then Albert Finney's hair, followed closely by Albert Finney, walks into a random bar and happens to find Edward James Olmos and all of his friends, and we get something of an explanation as to what has been going on in the movie up to this point.
It's not wolves. It's Wolfen. For 20,000 years, Wilson. 10 times your fucking Christian era. The skins and the wolves, the great hunting nations lived together. Nature in balance. Then the slaughter came. The smartest ones, they went underground. Into the new wilderness, your cities. Into the great slum areas, the graveyard of your fucking species.
These great hunters became your scavengers. Your garbage, your abandoned people became their new meat animal.
Animals? Are you sure, Wilson? They might be gods.
Okay, so hear me out on this one.
Also, you may have ruined this movie for me because I never thought his hair was a big issue until this.
It's a big poofy issue. So far we have...
So you're not digging the hair.
No, I like the hair. I never saw anything wrong with it.
So far we got the rich guy, the rich developer gets killed right away. That can't have been an accident.
No.
Then we get into this whole thing about how the wolves are an endangered species, right? We got that. At the end of the movie, to make all the wolves feel better, Albert Finney destroys the model of the development, which presumably means now nobody knows what it was supposed to look like, so they can't build it, I guess, or something along those lines. So what is Wolfen telling us here? What is their message of this movie? It's like, we should, we can't gentrify these poor neighborhoods, so here we go. We can pat ourselves on the back for preserving this endangered species and take care of our homeless problem in one go. It's a win-win. We let these dozen or so wolves run around in the ruins of the Bronx and eat our homeless people. Everybody's happy. Is that what they're getting at?
I didn't get the homeless people bit.
They mention it at least twice in this movie. Even Gregory Hines says they're taking people no one will miss. And using them as their food.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. And I did...
That can't possibly be the message they're going for in this movie. But is it?
Modest proposal.
What else are they doing?
Well, I mean, I understand the want to keep the land preserved. I get that bit. The whole homeless bit went over my head. I mean, now that you say it, it's there. It's just I guess I didn't.
Edward James Olmos even says it.
The part that always stuck out to me especially with what Gregory Hines was saying in the beginning was, I found it really interesting that they never ate
anyone
the tainted organs and things like that. So maybe I missed the other part because I was like, oh, they aren't eating the bits that are bad because they know, and I guess I just missed the whole homeless bit.
Well, yeah, it's unsettling for certain. I mean, you're not going to walk out of that going, all right, cool.
Well, it's kind of like that, we'll scratch your back, you scratch ours.
Yeah.
Because in a big city like New York, that is an issue, especially for the people who don't want it to be an issue anymore. So him painting it out that way, maybe it is kind of like if you let us keep this, we'll help you with that. Right. It's not a good bargaining agreement, but
tit for tat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that all the Wolf guys were looked to be fairly gainfully employed. They didn't necessarily have to go around killing homeless people to survive. It's just something they enjoyed doing.
Or it's an insatiable urge that they have to
act on.
Yes.
Yeah. Albert Finney and our intrepid heroes seem to come away convinced that, okay, this is fine now.
Yeah.
We solved the problem.
It's a fair enough ending.
It's a bit weird.
No, yeah, you're right. But it is easy when it's painted, and I'm not speaking on the homeless part of it, but clearly he does a 180 when he realizes it is people who are have been the victim, because he realizes, oh, endangered species and then the Native Americans, like, they are clearly people who have been downtrodden and all of that. So it was easier for him to come to that conclusion than before, when you just think somebody is killing for no reason. Not saying it's justified.
Right.
But you...
within the logic of the piece.
Of it.
Yeah. But I'm also kind of I enjoy when a movie, and this could be accidental, like you're saying, what is the goal of it? But I like it when it is purposefully vague. Like, what am I supposed to take away from this? It's not a clear-cut ending to where I'm like, okay, this is exactly pinpoint, the right person was arrested for this, blah, 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 that kind of crap.
And not everything can have a happy ending.
Exactly.
Like ending on a very, very long shot of cooking a hamburger, like we did at the end of The Howling.
Rare.
Yes. Which seemed equally as weird to me.
But that's the tone of that piece, though.
It makes sense in that one.
And like, in the Wolfen, that would be a little bit off.
Or if you had presented that in The Howling, like, oh, let us eat your homeless, because then we don't have to attack everyone else. Then it would have been seen as comedic, and then it probably would have hit better than in this, where it is a more serious tone. You're like, wait, did you just say you're going to eat our homeless?
Yeah. That would be a very tough comedic tone to strike.
I mean, there's a whole Jonathan.
I don't know.
Well, no, Jonathan
have you seen the $1 Billion Hobo?
It's not even that. There is a piece that's taught in English high school courses about eating the homeless. Modest Proposal by Jonathan Swift. And it's about, hey, our kids are dying because they can't eat, so let's just take the people off the streets and feed that to them. Like, so I mean, it's something that has been.
It wasn't adopted.
It's resonating.
It wasn't adopted as policy. Just so you know.
No, okay. I was gonna Google.
Everyone sort of let that one go for a long time.
Yeah.
Until the 30s, I think. But yeah.
And they had other issues to worry about back then. Yeah.
So yeah, Wolfen, $17 million budget. Total U.S. gross came to $10 million, which is a little painful. Maybe why we never got any sequels, or they just kind of never bothered releasing any definitive version of this. Maybe
Give me
someday.
An error release of the 4.5 hour cut.
There you go.
With Wolf Vision.
I think Jason is really the most excited about seeing the potential of a longer cut of this.
If it gets me the transformation from the wolf's point of view, which I don't think I've seen before in a movie, then
then there you go.
Do that.
That would be amazing.
So Wolfen didn't have long to live in theaters, because not only was Raiders still going strong, but it was followed 3 weeks later by American Werewolf in London. So very tight window to make its money back, and of course didn't happen. But American Werewolf in London had a smaller budget, $10 million total, went on to gross $60 million. Didn't get a sequel. I'm not counting American Werewolf as a sequel.
Let's not talk about that at all.
Nobody should. Was released 23rd of August 1981. Briefly took the top spot away from Raiders, which was in its 12th week of release. Lost it again before Continental Divide took the #1 spot for good. We say it became a beloved horror classic. It's not with everybody. There are people who can't stand this movie and think it's idiotic.
It's magnificent.
One of which was Roger Ebert, who wrote at the time, An American Werewolf in London seems curiously unfinished, as if director John Landis spent all his energy on spectacular set pieces and then didn't want to bother with things like transitions, character development, or an ending.
How does he miss the mark about... I mean, there's tremendous character development in that film, but okay.
He did, yeah. And it does end. There are credits and everything.
Yeah. Well, it's not, there's an obvious ending to it, though.
Yeah.
I was waiting, after reading that, I was waiting for the whole thing just to keep going, like Never-Ending Story or something.
And then it said, when in Hollywood, visit
but it actually,
Hollywood,
it actually
But it doesn't even have one of those
ask for Babs.
where you're like, oh, but is it over? Like, it ends. Like, there's no other way to take that ending.
I don't know how else you do it. John Landis was not necessarily known as a horror movie director.
Well, doesn't he not consider this a horror?
I don't think it is. I don't know if I count it as a horror movie. It has elements.
I definitely do. But
it would be horror comedy.
But I don't even like that as like this, like as broad of a subgenre as that can be. I don't like bumping this one. Because, but I think to me, it's always been a horror film. But yes, it's very comedic, more so than The Howling.
It doesn't have
it's
any.
Clearly intentional. Whereas you can obviously watch The Howling and not realize it.
But I think
this one, I feel it comes out of the gate with it. Like, you know what you're getting into.
But I also think it could be like, you could look at it from just strictly a horror standpoint and be maybe amused by that element of it, but not really catch on to it immediately.
You get your gore shots.
Yeah.
Some pretty spectacular ones.
Absolutely.
You get your werewolf transformation.
The single greatest werewolf transformation I think that's been filmed.
The benchmark for sure.
Certainly.
I fucking love this movie.
It's so fantastic. It's one of those that I hate myself for waiting so long.
Really?
It does hit almost right away one of the things I love in horror movies. And one thing I've learned from watching a lot of horror movies is you never dismiss local folklore and superstition out of hand. If some guy in a giant straw hat and overalls says something to you like, you kids best stay out of those woods there.
You stay out of the woods.
Like a Crazy Ralph type warning.
You stay out of the woods after dark, which leads us to the first big encounter we have with these two idiots.
Hey, wait a minute.
You made me miss. Sorry. I've never missed that board before.
Jack, we better go.
Are you kidding? I'm starved.
There's no food here.
Shall we go, Jack?
Apparently so.
You can't let them go.
How much do we owe you?
Nothing, lads. Go. God be with you.
Oh, thank you.
Wait! You just can't let them go?
Go. Stay on the road. Keep clear to the moors.
Thank you.
Beware the moon, lads.
Yeah.
And what's the first thing they do? They get off the road, they go straight into the moors, and pay no attention to the moon.
But you wouldn't have a movie without that.
Exactly.
So.
Well, that is true, but still.
But there's always that point in a movie where you're like, well, if they had just done this, but then it would be literal credits roll and then it's over.
Yeah, and there's no movie, like I said, and you would have no An American Werewolf in London, period. You would just have
glad that
British werewolves.
They strayed off the road.
Yeah.
British werewolves are perfectly fine.
Yeah. All I know is that was a weird fucking place, man. It was, man, but boy, they could play darts.
Oh, yes. Was it ever really established in this movie just how old these two guys are supposed to be? And in particular, David. We know he lives
at college years.
I took it like maybe right before or right after graduation.
Yeah.
I mean,
around
he acts like a high school horn dog through most of this movie.
I mean, that's men in general.
They look a bit older, but I would have guessed college. They never come out and say it.
And it's hard to tell, too, because, like, if you look at Grease, none of those look like they would be in high school. But then even if you look at high school back then, high schoolers looked older than high schoolers now. So it is hard to tell.
They used to get held back several grades.
I always took it as early to mid-20s.
Well, right.
Like
yeah,
23, 24, around there.
The reason I bring this up is because of Alex, Jenny Agutt's character. Alex is clearly older than David is, probably by quite a few years. She's established. She's a nurse. She's been through medical school.
I think she's that much older, though.
2 to 4 years is nursing. Nursing isn't like the same as a medical degree. So if she went, and I don't know how it is in Europe because their schooling is different. As far as 17, you hit a different, it's not, you don't go directly to college. You do a year where you test to see where you go, and then you go. So I would put her at mid to maybe late 20s. Not that
like
much
25,
older than him.
26.
Yeah.
And also, I'm looking at, like, she did Walkabout. She did Logan Run prior to this. So I'm looking at her actual age.
Mhm.
Sure.
Yeah.
I would say mid to late 20s for her.
The only reason I thought about it when I was watching this is that Alex seems to relate to younger characters in the movie much better than anyone who seems to be about her age or older.
Yeah,
Maybe that's
fair.
because she works with kids a lot, but when anytime she's talking to the older doctor, it's very prickly.
Well, she's also having a relationship with a patient she probably isn't supposed to have and could potentially lose her
And she could
job
have had
for.
a bit of a history. She says she had a few, like, seven lovers.
She specifies 7, yes.
But maybe she'd had a history with this before. But, you know, it's awful. It's going to be awful prickly anyway when you're dealing with John Woodbine. So he's an abrasive fellow.
I mean, I can kind of almost see where Ebert was coming from a little bit in the tonally. It's kind of all over the place. What was the wolf soldier thing about? He's having these flashbacks, which I get. That's fine. But what were
They're just visions.
What was that?
Could it be that when you are infected, you take on everybody else's memories as well?
That's a good point. That is a very good point.
Because it could be something that it's not necessarily anything that he
And they're
went
Nazi
through,
werewolves. Yeah.
There's no insignia anywhere on those uniforms.
Well, I don't know. I'd
They
always
were
thought that
always
they were.
interpreted as Nazis, sure, but I made a note to watch that part closely. There's no anywhere on those uniforms any insignias of rank.
It could have been because I know in Germany you cannot have anything with a swastika imagery on it shown. So they could have deliberately left that out to be able to show it in other countries.
Good point.
Could be.
It's possible. It's open to conjecture.
The scene goes by really quickly, though, also.
And for the most part, even without that, you know a USS uniform. Like, the imagery is there even without that.
That's why I'm identifying with it. That's what and I could be completely wrong too, but that's just what you think about it when you go, okay, that's what they are.
You had mentioned maybe you inherit the memories of the people he's killed. This leads me to something that I found very interesting is that, say, when Dante was making The Howling, he said that he wanted to do something different with the werewolf myth, which he didn't really do anything different with it. It's kind of like now if somebody says, I have a totally fresh take on zombies, you probably don't. But
Undead werewolf, though.
We do get
How many
one in
undead
this.
werewolves have we seen before?
I can't recall any other werewolf movie where you get an explanation of this part of a curse where you have to have
the limbo,
where you're visited by people who are in limbo, which we get here.
We were attacked by a werewolf. I'm not listening to this. On the moors, we were attacked by a lycanthrope, a werewolf. I was murdered, an unnatural death. And now I walk the earth in limbo until the werewolf's curse is lifted.
Shut up.
The wolf's bloodline must be severed. The last remaining werewolf must be destroyed. It's you, David.
I always found that little flappy bit of makeup on his chin to be kind of distracting because it wiggles when he talks. But
I like it though because it makes you focus on it. Like
I've seen a lot of werewolf movies, and I can't remember any of them taking this route.
Well, that's what I love about all three that we're looking at is they are all wolves, but they're all different.
Yes.
Like it isn't like you get the same thing over and over. Like you said with zombie movies, you typically do get it's zombies. Oh, it's
recent zombie
you don't
movies,
have
certainly, yeah.
But so I like the fact that all three bring something different to the table with what they're giving you, especially this one.
Yeah.
Has anybody done that one since? Has anybody done the limbo thing since then?
Since we're not talking about the sequel,
no.
I'm trying to think. There was a movie recently where I thought that they kind of just stole that concept, and I don't know if it was werewolves, but it was.
You typically get it with vampires.
Well, I mean, we'll look at Idle Hands, maybe.
Maybe.
But that's not. That's kind of its own thing anyway. But no, it seemed like there was something recently, and it escapes me now. But
the only thing I can think of, like I said, with vampire movies, you get if you eliminate the original one, then everybody else quits being vampires.
Yeah.
Like that's the only similar thing that I can think of.
That wasn't even carried through on a great deal of vampire movies either.
No, but you do have it. Like it is the closest one that.
Yeah.
But now I want to watch Idle Hands. So thanks.
You're welcome.
So fantastic makeup effect, and he just gets progressively more deteriorated as the movie goes on, except for his eyes.
Which actually, since Katie just recently saw this movie, like if she had lived through the era we did watching it on home video.
Well, I wasn't alive anyway. I wouldn't have been able to live
No,
through
but
it
I
then.
mean, we could not appreciate the scale of this makeup.
Oh, no,
It
but
was
I have
always
also...
darkly lit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very
Terrible
muddy.
transfers.
Yeah.
But I have always been able to, like, because there's a lot of stuff that I see now for the first time. And it's so amazing to look at it and go, damn, when that came out, it changed.
Well, the transformation sequence in this is still effective.
Well, I had seen that
Still really,
ages
really
ago. I just had never seen the full film.
And credit to the makeup, but also to David Naughton for selling the hell out of that thing, too.
Yeah. I mean, that's honestly, if you were going to be an actor in a werewolf film, that would be your go-to place, David Naughton.
To take from.
Yeah. I mean, you could do Lon Chaney Jr., but that's the
That's
one.
going too far back. He's like, so I just got to glue old hair to my face and I'm a werewolf? Hey.
Yeah. Jack Pierce or Bud West.
Granted, they were working with what they had at the time, sure.
Yeah.
But this was groundbreaking. No one had done this before.
I do also love that these 3 films show us that if you have a werewolf movie, you automatically get man butt in it. Because all of them have naked asses
man
in
butt
them.
in Howling?
No.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, in the sex
The choreographed sex scene.
Yeah, that's true.
I always
That's true.
notice.
I blocked that out.
I don't.
His version doesn't have this.
And it's in Wolf Vision in Wolfen.
I get
Yeah.
that. I get that.
in People Vision as well.
I get that reel missing pops up and then they're straight into the next thing. I don't recall that.
Yeah. Where were we?
I don't remember.
Wolf butt.
We were appreciating man butt
Not
in
wolf
werewolf
butt.
movies.
That would be weird.
No, that was the progression. That's the next step. You want to see wolf butt.
One thing I tried to get some research done on, but couldn't find anything, is if you become a werewolf and you're in a foreign country, does that affect your tourist visa or your citizenship status at all?
Probably.
I would think it would.
Because there are some countries that if you take a dog into them, you have to have the dog in quarantine for 6 months. Australia is one of them because Johnny Depp just got in a lot of trouble for taking his dogs and not quarantining them.
So they could revoke your tourist visa for becoming a werewolf.
But that's why you don't tell people you're a werewolf.
Oh, I see.
True, they can't connect it because they never see you both in the same room.
Are you a British citizen as a werewolf? Because you're transforming
He's not a
into
British
one.
citizen anyway. So.
Well, you have, or do you get dual citizenship?
I wouldn't even admit that I'm a naked American man who could potentially steal someone's balloons.
Oh, yeah.
What?
A naked American man stole my balloons.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just saying.
I couldn't find any serious research that had been done on the topic of werewolf citizenship, so
I would just go with...
Clearly, there hasn't been enough done on this topic.
You probably just have to be in quarantine for a little bit and then go on your merry way.
For the best of everyone, all things considering what happens toward the very end of this movie, that yes, I would go that far. We do get this Piccadilly Circus bloodbath, which is
see you next Wednesday.
Astonishingly good. Yeah, we get the John Landis see you next Wednesday thing. It ends with what I was saying was one of the greatest lines in the entire movie. Aside from Louis Tully's "Okay, who brought the dog" in Ghostbusters, it has to be one of the finest understatements ever made.
Smooth Thrills descriptive audio service activated. The wolf thing is eating people's faces. That guy's head came off. So sad. Now it's attacking a big red bus. Everyone is very upset. More people scream and die. Traffic is terrible. The wolf seems very angry about something, but it won't say what it is. Now a police person is killed.
Sister Hobbs said there's a disturbance in Piccadilly Circus involving some sort of mad dog.
Really? Every time.
And not Dennis Hopper, Mad Dog Morgan.
There's been a disturbance in Piccadilly.
Well,
that is one way of putting it. Yes.
So wait,
I feel like some of that is too that's just how all Londoners talk. Everything is so formal, and they could take something that we would just be like, oh, it's over there, and it would just sound so just...
And we get this fantastic just explosion of violence that Tarantino would do in every one of his movies after this.
Well, I think also it's unclear, and he just says, a disturbance, mad dog. He could be talking about see you next Wednesday, because when he storms in that room, he's like, I told you never to do this thing again. And he's like, you never told me any such thing. Not you, you twit hair. I never met you before in my life. Oh, sorry. I don't know. But no, I lean towards the werewolf disturbance.
Yes. Soon afterwards, our hero, I guess, David, gets shot, and the movie actually ends.
Yes.
I'm not sure what ending
to the Marcel.
Yeah, because it's not even like, oh, his hand moves or something. Like, he's dead. Like, there is a finite ending to this movie.
Alex cries real tears. You see some man butt with several extra holes in it.
That's gonna be my shtick. I'm gonna point out all the man butt in movies.
That's the T-shirt we'll put up in the merch shop.
Man butt.
Okay. Man butt.
I already know like
man
5 people
expert.
who will buy it. MBE. I'm gonna add it to my Twitter profile.
There you go.
Be like PhD, MBE. Well, okay.
So, is there any truth to his son making a remake of this?
I certainly hope.
Because I've heard it for years. I mean, I don't want
it. Not anymore.
Not since he's become a very problematic
You know what? I was never.
figure.
He always annoyed the crap out of me anyway.
Since
so
he
as
became
long as he's gone, I'm fine with it.
Okay.
He has become the one who cannot be named at this point. Yeah. So
Notice I didn't say it.
Yeah, I wouldn't count on anything like that happening. I
was just curious because it is something that I've heard for years. Like.
Well, John Landis was going to do a sequel in the early 90s, and unfortunately, it didn't get made. But that led to him producing that series She-Wolf of London, because he wanted to actually do a TV series based off of An American Werewolf in London with Universal. And Universal's like, well, we don't actually own the rights. Polygram owns the rights to it. We distributed it. Now they own the rights, but it's kind of dicey. I think Lionsgate even owns a share of it now. But
oh boy, Lionsgate is in too much trouble.
Well, it's like they have like streaming rights to it. It's weird, but yeah. So there was always that potential of continuing it, and then he went off and made Blues Brothers 2000.
Yeah.
I'm also okay with that though. Like on its own.
No,
it's
yeah,
I'm
fine with it.
Like it doesn't need
but
continuation.
I think he put the seed out there, and I think other people ran with it and made that abomination of a sequel.
See, I always thought that one was meant to be a loose remake because I've never seen it, so I didn't know.
It's meant to be something. I
don't think I've seen it all the way through.
It's tough. It's a tough watch.
It didn't seem like a good idea to begin with.
No. I never finished it, and then I came back to it at a later point, and it was on cable or something. All I know is there was like people shooting guns, werewolves shooting guns.
Oh.
I'm like, yeah, it's not where I would have thought it would have gone, but okay.
I just love this. The transformation! Exclamation point.
1 hour in. Yes, we get the that seems
but
to be
it never
the spot.
feels, because you know how some movies, and I felt this with The Howling, is it's like it's so slow until you get into it. Whereas this, it's like you never once are like, I haven't seen a wolf yet. You don't really feel that or care about it. It's like it's a good movie, and then you get the transformation, and it's even better. So at least I never felt that way about it.
I remember when I first saw this movie, and I didn't think I cared for it.
How old were you?
I would have been probably 8 years old or 9 years old.
But I can see that being difficult.
It's a tough one for an 8-year-old to get into. Yeah.
But
because
it was a different
kid, you
tone.
want that violence. You want that.
But it was one of those things where it was on the CBS late night movie, and I recorded it and watched it the next day. But then actually the tape stopped recording, and I only got like 20 minutes into it. And so I begged Mom to rent it for me at the old Video Circle in Philomath, Oregon. Anyway, little plug for them. They're no longer around, but
good plug. Yeah.
So I watched the movie, and then I was like, I don't know how I feel about this. And then I got on my bicycle and rode around the neighborhood for like about 20 minutes, came back, and I was like, that's probably the best movie ever. So it was like, because it was so kind of an unorthodox werewolf film
Mm-hmm.
for me at that time, certainly.
Especially with the not purgatory, but like the in-between limbo thing.
Yeah,
Like
definitely.
it has a different spin on it entirely.
Yeah.
So
that kind of threw me, I think. Yeah.
you're just like, what? I miss that cloudy, not even cloudy judgment of when you're a kid where everything you see ends up being, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen.
Right, yeah.
I do that innocence where you watch stuff now and you're like, this is garbage. Had I watched this as a kid, I would have been like the greatest thing ever.
I watched plenty of stuff as a kid and recognized it as garbage.
Well, I see. I hate when you love something as a kid and then you visit it again as an adult and you're like, I should have just left it as a memory. I should have just.
Yeah.
There's a lot like that.
There's a few. I'm pretty good on those. I don't
Mac
really
and
have
Me
a lot.
is really difficult now.
I think that would have been difficult at the beginning, but come on, the McDonald's scene I know is amazing, but and the whole resuscitation via Coke products. But other than that, I can't see where you would have a fault in it.
You're defending Mac and Me.
Mac and Me.
Oh my God. All right. We should probably close out this episode right there.
Close on Mac and
That's
Me.
the pin.
Putting the pen down.
Done.
Shutting it off.
All right.
That's it. The show is over. Thank you for listening. The Smooth Thrills Radio Hour is a production of Ghostcraft and is recorded live in Dallas, Texas. Please email your questions and comments to autopilot at smooththrillsradiohour.com. Enjoy the rest of your day.